My fiancée said I didn't dress like a husband, so I took off the suit, walked away from the aisle, and let her explain that alone. I'm a 28-year-old guy, and I've been with my fiancée Sophie for 3 years. Everything seemed perfect on the outside, but little did I know we were on a path toward heartbreak. I always thought I'd be the lucky one, finding someone who'd truly understand me. But things were never that simple. It started off so well. Too well, maybe. We met when I was 25 at a mutual friend's party. Sophie was charming, beautiful, and confident in a way that made everyone gravitate toward her. She made me feel like I was the only one in the room. I thought that was the kind of love people talked about in fairy tales. She was everything I ever wanted until I realized I was just a part of her perfect story. As we got closer, the first cracks started to show. Sophie began making little comments about my appearance. "That's not your best shirt," she'd say. "You know, you really should put more effort into how you look, especially if you want to keep me." At first, I brushed it off. I figured she was just teasing. I thought it was cute, even endearing, how she seemed to care about how I looked. But I didn't realize how much those little comments would chip away at my self-esteem. The real shift came when she started saying things like, "You're not exactly husband material, you know?" Or, "Don't you think you should start dressing more seriously?" I'd laugh it off, thinking she was just joking, but the words stung more than I let on. She'd mention how her friends' boyfriends always dressed so well, how they were more put together. It wasn't just about the clothes anymore. It was like I wasn't good enough as I was, that I had to change to fit her version of what I should be. I remember one night, sitting on the couch after a long day of work, when she said, "Honestly, sometimes I feel like I'm settling for less." Those words hit me like a punch to the gut. But I didn't say anything. I couldn't, because I didn't want to lose her. But inside, I was starting to question everything. Was I not enough? Was I ever enough? I didn't know the answer, but something was changing, and I didn't know how to stop it. I thought maybe it was just a phase. Maybe we'd work through it before the wedding. After all, the wedding was just around the corner. I thought this was the hard part, the testing of the waters before we committed. Little did I know, this was just the beginning. As the wedding day approached, things got worse. Sophie's comments shifted from my clothes to everything else. My job, my hobbies, the way I carried myself. She wanted me to change, to become someone else. It didn't sit right with me. I tried talking to her about how I was feeling, but every time she brushed it off. "You're overthinking this," she'd say. "It's just about stepping up, being the man you're supposed to be." The more I tried to explain how her comments were hurting me, the more she insisted I was being sensitive. She always made me feel like I was the one in the wrong, like I was being unreasonable for feeling hurt. One night we were discussing wedding details over dinner. She casually mentioned how she couldn't wait to marry a man who would finally live up to her standards. I stared at her, trying to hold back the anger. I wanted to shout that I had been trying so hard to meet her expectations, but every step I took seemed to fall short. Her ideal vision of a husband wasn't me. It wasn't even close. She wanted someone who could look a certain way, act a certain way, and fit into this perfect mold she had created. The more I thought about it, the more I realized I was never going to be enough. Not in her eyes. I wasn't going to be the person she wanted me to be, and I didn't even know if I wanted to be that person anymore. We started fighting more often, especially when the wedding plans came up. Every conversation about the wedding felt like I was walking on eggshells. The excitement I had once felt about marrying her was being replaced by a sense of dread. I couldn't tell if it was the wedding I was dreading or the idea of marrying someone who saw me as a project. I thought about calling it off. But the wedding was only a month away, and I couldn't bring myself to do it. I was already so deep in it, but the deeper I sank, the more I felt like I was losing myself. The suit was supposed to be a small part of the wedding, but it became a symbol of everything wrong in our relationship. I spent hours picking it out, hoping it would be something Sophie would like. I didn't want to just look good. I wanted to make her proud. But the moment I showed it to her, I could see her face drop. "It's fine," she said. But there was something in her voice that didn't sound fine at all. "I guess it'll do." I wasn't expecting her to be ecstatic, but I also wasn't expecting that. She wasn't excited. She didn't even seem interested. I thought maybe she was just having a bad day, so I tried to laugh it off. "It's classic, right?" I asked, trying to keep things light. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she just nodded, her eyes distant. Then she said something that broke me. "You know, it's just not the kind of thing I imagined my husband wearing." The words stung. The idea of her imagining me as her husband, wearing something completely different, something that wasn't me, hit like a ton of bricks. It wasn't just the suit. It was the realization that I wasn't good enough for her, not even in the smallest way. That night, I stayed up, staring at myself in the mirror, trying to figure out what I was doing wrong. Was I not supposed to be myself anymore? Was I supposed to become some version of a man that she had in her head, that I had never even seen? The more I thought about it, the more I realized that it wasn't just about the suit. It was everything. Every little comment, every subtle jab, every suggestion that I wasn't enough. It was all building up, and I felt suffocated. I had no idea what to do. Part of me wanted to walk away then and there, but the other part of me just couldn't. The wedding was coming. I thought I could make it work, that I could somehow live up to what she wanted. But the more I tried, the more I lost myself in the process. The morning of the wedding arrived, and I was a bundle of nerves. Sophie was running late, of course, but I could already feel the tension rising between us. She had been distant all week, and her last few comments had only made things worse. I tried to calm myself down, telling myself it was just pre-wedding jitters. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting my tie for the 100th time, thinking about the day ahead. Sophie had always talked about how perfect our wedding would be, how it would be the start of a perfect life together. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that I wasn't the one she had imagined standing at the altar. When I picked up my phone to check the time, I saw a text from Sophie. "Are you really wearing that?" I froze. "Are you really wearing that?" I couldn't believe it. Of all the times for her to send a message like that on the morning of our wedding, she chose now. It wasn't even a question, just a demand, an unspoken judgment wrapped up in a few words. The anger I felt was instant. But worse, the hurt settled deeper than I had ever imagined. I tried to brush it off, but that text hit me like a punch to the gut. I looked at myself in the mirror again, seeing a version of me I didn't even recognize. I wasn't the man she wanted, not in this moment, and maybe not ever. She didn't even have the decency to call, to tell me what was wrong with what I was wearing. No. Instead, she sent a text like it was just another casual comment. I stood there in that moment, paralyzed, wondering how we had gotten here, wondering why I was so willing to fight for someone who made me feel so small. At that point, I didn't know what to do. The wedding was happening, and the guests were already arriving. Sophie's father had arrived early, and I could hear the distant chatter of our families gathering outside. The pressure was suffocating. I was standing there, on the edge, wondering if I could actually walk down the aisle. Would it even be worth it? How could I go through with it when I felt like I was slowly suffocating under her constant disapproval? But then, something inside me snapped. I realized I couldn't keep living like this. I couldn't marry someone who couldn't even accept me for who I was. Not anymore. The ceremony had started, and there I was, standing at the altar, staring at Sophie as she walked down the aisle. She looked stunning, of course, absolutely radiant. But all I could think about were the last few weeks. The tension, the hurtful comments, the feeling of never being enough. The closer she got, the more I felt like I was drowning in this suffocating pressure to be someone I wasn't. I had tried so hard to be the person she wanted me to be, but it was like nothing ever measured up. Not the suit, not the way I spoke, not the things I did. She wanted me to change, to fit this mold that I didn't even recognize. The closer she got to me, the more I felt like I was losing myself piece by piece. Sophie reached the altar and smiled at me, but there was a coldness in her eyes I hadn't seen before. It was like she was looking at someone she didn't quite know. Maybe she was disappointed. Maybe she already knew this was a mistake. When the officiant asked if I took Sophie to be my wife, I froze for a moment. I looked at her, standing there in her perfect white dress, and for the first time in a long while, I wondered if I was doing the right thing. Was this really the life I wanted? Was I ready to continue being someone I wasn't? Just to please her? But then she spoke, casually, almost dismissively. You better be wearing something nice, something a husband would wear. It was like a slap across my face in front of everyone. It wasn't even a question. It was a statement, a judgment, something that had become so normal between us that I barely even flinched. But in that moment, I felt a wave of clarity wash over me. I realized I couldn't keep doing this. I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine when I was suffocating. I had been quiet for so long, letting her dictate who I should be. But that was over now. I stood there at the altar, the weight of Sophie's words crushing me. You better be wearing something nice, something a husband would wear. It was the final straw. In front of everyone, I felt completely exposed, like I was standing in front of a mirror that showed me everything I hated about myself. I wanted to scream, to walk away, but I couldn't. Not yet. I was frozen in place trying to make sense of everything. I had been with Sophie for years. I had given her everything I had, my time, my heart, my soul, and all I had in return was constant criticism and expectations I could never meet. I thought that was love, that if I tried hard enough, things would eventually work out. But now, standing there, it felt like I had been playing a role in her story, not living my own life. Sophie was still smiling, unaware of what was happening inside me. She looked so sure, so perfect, and I hated myself for not being able to give her that same certainty. My heart was racing, my palms were sweating, and I felt like I was suffocating. I wanted to tell her everything, how I wasn't sure about this anymore, how I felt like I was losing myself in the process of trying to be what she wanted me to be. But the words caught in my throat. The vows came next, and as the officiant asked us to say them, my mind was spinning. My thoughts were all over the place and I couldn't even focus on the words I was supposed to say. I didn't want to promise to love her forever when I couldn't even promise to love myself in this relationship. For a moment, I thought about walking away, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. Not yet. I kept hoping that something would click, that Sophie would see how wrong this was, but she was still smiling, still acting like everything was fine. It was then that I realized I couldn't keep pretending. I had lost myself in this relationship, and I had no idea how to find my way back. Everything inside me snapped in that moment. The officiant was about to move on to the vows, and I realized that if I didn't act now, I would regret it for the rest of my life. This wasn't the life I wanted. This wasn't the man I wanted to be. I stood there for a few more seconds, trying to control the whirlwind of thoughts in my mind. Sophie was still smiling at me, waiting for me to say my vows. Everyone was watching. The guests, our families. Everyone was waiting for this moment to be the happiest of our lives. But for me, it was the moment I realized I had to let go. I slowly unbuttoned my suit jacket, feeling a sense of calm wash over me as I did. It was like I was shedding a part of myself, something that had been weighing me down for so long. I looked at Sophie, then at the crowd, and I said, I can't do this. Her face went from confusion to shock in seconds. What? She whispered, her voice barely audible. I can't marry someone who doesn't love me for who I am, I said, my voice firm but quiet. I've tried to be the person you want me to be, but I've lost myself in the process. I can't keep pretending. Sophie's eyes widened, and for a moment I thought I saw a flicker of guilt, but it was quickly replaced with frustration. What are you talking about? She snapped. You can't just walk away from this. You're ruining everything, but I didn't care. I took a step back, then another. I turned to walk away from the altar, from the wedding, from the life I thought I was supposed to have. The silence in the room was deafening as I walked down the aisle. Every step I took felt like a weight lifted off my chest. It wasn't anger that drove me. It was clarity. I couldn't spend another second in a place where I wasn't accepted for who I was. And as I stepped out into the open air, I felt something I hadn't felt in so long. Freedom. I didn't even make it to the exit before Sophie was running after me, her heels clicking desperately against the floor. Wait, wait! She shouted, her voice cracking. She reached for my arm, but I pulled away. The look on her face was a mixture of confusion and anger, but there was something else there too. Fear. She didn't know what to do now, and neither did I. What's wrong with you? Why are you doing this? We're getting married, she cried, her voice rising in panic. Don't you love me? I stopped in my tracks, turning slowly to face her. I thought I did, I said, my voice steady but laced with years of hurt. But I'm not your puppet to dress up and control. I'm not someone you can mold into whatever you want me to be. I've had enough. Sophie's face fell, her eyes brimming with tears. You don't understand. I just wanted everything to be perfect. For us to be perfect. She sobbed, stepping forward again, but I took another step back, shaking my head. You never saw me for who I am, I said, the weight of the words heavy in the air. You saw a version of me that wasn't real. I'm not perfect, and I never will be. But I am who I am. She stood there, completely broken, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. It was like the reality of everything hit her at once. All the manipulation, all the control. She had been playing a game, but now the consequences were too real for her to ignore. She had lost me in front of everyone, and she knew it. I watched her crumble, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel bad. I just felt free. The silence was deafening as I walked away, leaving her standing there, alone in the middle of the aisle, surrounded by confused guests. It didn't take long for the fallout to ripple through our families. The next few days were a whirlwind of calls, messages, and conversations with family members trying to mediate. Some of them sided with Sophie, insisting I'd made a mistake, that I was just throwing away everything we had built. You can't just walk away from a relationship like that, they said. You need to work through your issues. But what they didn't understand was that my issue wasn't just with Sophie. It was with how I had allowed myself to be treated, how I had let her control and belittle me for so long. Other family members, though, quietly pulled me aside, offering their support. I've seen the way she treats you, my cousin said one night. You made the right choice. It wasn't just about the wedding. It was about your happiness, your peace. Those words meant more than I could express. It felt like a weight was being lifted off me with every conversation I had with those who understood. Sophie, on the other hand, wasn't letting go so easily. She called me over and over, her voice shaking with anger and disbelief. You ruined everything, she'd say, blaming me for ruining the wedding, the family's expectations, her dream. It was always my fault, she said, that things had fallen apart. But with each call, I grew less and less affected. Her words no longer held the same weight they once did. As the days passed, I realized how much stronger I was becoming. I wasn't just rejecting Sophie's control. I was rejecting the version of myself I had become under her influence. I started focusing on the things that made me feel whole again. The emotional tension only increased, but I knew now that my peace mattered more than anything else. The days following the wedding felt surreal. I'd walked away from everything I thought I wanted, from the dream I had painted for myself and for Sophie. It was hard at first, not just because of the rejection, but because I had spent so long trying to be someone I wasn't. I had been so focused on what she needed, on meeting her expectations, that I lost sight of who I was. I didn't know who I was anymore. But as the days turned into weeks, I started to feel something new, something I hadn't felt in a long time. Freedom. It was scary at first. I had no idea what I was supposed to do with myself. But slowly I began to remember who I was before Sophie, before the pressure to be perfect. I remembered the things I loved, the hobbies I used to have, the dreams I had put on hold for so long. I spent more time with friends who made me feel accepted, who reminded me that I wasn't the problem. I started reading again, something I hadn't done in years, and began to rediscover the parts of me that had been buried under the weight of her expectations. And for the first time in a long time, I felt at peace with myself. I'm not just the guy who couldn't live up to her standards, I thought one evening, sitting alone on my couch. I'm someone worthy of love just as I am. That realization hit me hard. For so long, I had let Sophie's criticism define me. I had let her dictate my worth, and I had convinced myself that I was nothing without her approval. But now, I saw myself differently. I wasn't a failure for not meeting her impossible standards. I was a person worthy of love, of respect, of happiness. It felt like taking a deep breath after holding my breath for years. I wasn't perfect, but I was enough. It wasn't long before Sophie reached out. I didn't expect her to. After everything, I figured she would move on and never look back. But a week after the wedding, my phone buzzed with a text from her. My heart skipped a beat, and for a second I thought maybe I should ignore it. But curiosity got the better of me, and I opened the message. "I'm sorry," it said. "I never meant to hurt you. I've had time to think, and I realize now that I was wrong. I've been so focused on what I wanted that I forgot to love you for who you are." I read it over and over, trying to process what she was saying. Part of me wanted to believe it, wanted to believe that this was the Sophie I had fallen in love with, the one who could see past her own desires and truly understand me. But as I sat there, I realized something. I had already moved on. She called me later that day. Her voice was softer than I remembered, filled with regret. "I miss you," she said. "I know I messed up, but I still want us to be together. Please, let's talk." I could hear the desperation in her voice, but it didn't faze me the way it would have before. In that moment, I knew I had made the right choice. I wasn't the same person I had been when I walked out of that church. I had grown. "I'm sorry, Sophie," I said, my voice steady, "but I can't go back to that. I can't keep living for your approval, for your version of who I should be. I'm not the person you want me to be, and I don't want to be with someone who makes me feel like I'm not enough." There was silence on the other end of the line. Then she said, "I understand. I really do. But I'm sorry." Her apology didn't change anything. I had already let go, and I wasn't looking back. The days after Sophie's apology felt like a strange kind of silence. I wasn't angry, but I wasn't sad either. It was like I had finally released the weight of that relationship, and now I was free to breathe again. I realized how much I had been holding on to, how much I had sacrificed to keep her happy, to make her love me. But in the end, it wasn't enough. I couldn't keep changing myself just to fit someone else's idea of what I should be. I started focusing on myself again, on things I had forgotten about when I was with Sophie. I joined a gym, something I'd always wanted to do but never had the time for. I spent more time with friends who actually cared about me, who never judged me for the way I looked or the way I dressed. Slowly, I began to rebuild myself, piece by piece, realizing that I wasn't the man I used to be. I was better, stronger, more confident. The deeper I got into this journey of self-discovery, the more I realized how important it was to love myself first. I had spent so much time looking for validation from Sophie, and now I understood. I didn't need someone who tried to break me. I didn't need to dress how someone else thought I should, or act how they thought I should. I would dress how I felt, and love who I wanted. I no longer had to seek approval. I was enough on my own. The healing wasn't instant, but I was on the right path. For the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. I knew my worth, and I was no longer willing to settle for a life where I had to be someone I wasn't. The story ends here, but it's only the beginning of my new life. I'm not perfect, but I'm learning to love who I am, and that's enough.